Thank you, Michael, and thank you all for your welcome to me. Appreciate that. It's great to see some familiar faces and a lot of new ones. Hopefully, you will join the tribe as we think of ourselves of people who are trying to use business, the most powerful idea we've ever had, free market capitalism, to really elevate and uplift humanity. As we say, conscious capitalism is about elevating humanity through business, and it's elevating business through humanity, through bringing our whole being into what we do. I reflect back on my education in business. I had a 2-year MBA and 4 years in a PhD program, and I recognized at one point that it had all been about the head and the wallet. Everything was about the frameworks, the numbers, the theories, and everything is about the bottom line. And I've realized that that actually is not complete. We have to actually bring in the whole being, the whole human, right? Our heart, our spirit, our gut. All of those should be part of what we do in business and should be connected to that. So what I'm going to do today is share with you uh, some perspectives from my book, The Healing Organization. This is the book that was published actually about 5 years ago now, in 2019. But I think it's, to me, an evolution of conscious capitalism, that this is where we can go with these ideas, where we can consciously seek to become a source for healing in the world, a place of healing in the world, and a force for healing in society, actually. So let me start my remarks. I'll speak for about 25 minutes, and then we will have time for some interaction. Is everything working all right, Michael? The screen is up, and you can hear me fine?
Yes, looks great,
Okay,
Raj.
great.
Thank you.
So this is a book that, as I said, I wrote came out in 2019 with my friend Michael Gelb, who has been an MC of our CEO Summit multiple times. Um, so let's get into it. If you think about the times that we're living in currently, it's a very interesting time in human history. On the one hand, it's hard to argue with the fact that this is the best time to be born a human being. You would not choose any other time in history, I think, to be born a human being, because your chances of living a long, meaningful, purposeful life lived in freedom are greater than any time in human history by far. We're living in a peaceful time, we're living in a relatively prosperous time. And so I'm reminded of Dickens in The Tale of Two Cities, that it was the best of times. It was also the worst of times. We are facing existential threats of the kind that we haven't experienced before collectively as a species, I believe. Climate change being one of them, species extinction, loss of nature, many other things that are going on in our world. So, in that sense, it is also a time that is fraught with danger. And a lot of people are afraid of the future. I mean, I've never seen anything like this in my life. The future used to be an exciting place. But if you look at our children now, many of them don't want to have children because they think of the future as this dark place. And I know I do think it's not preordained. It's up to us to choose which of these paths we go down, whether it continues to be the age of wisdom and not the age of foolishness, with the season of light, season of darkness, right? Again, this is a choice, I believe. And it really depends a great deal on what happens in business. Because if business continues the same way that we've operated, with the same paradigm, same mindset, then I do think we have significant problems going forward. But if we change, then I don't think any of these problems are insurmountable. In fact, they all are solvable by a conscious approach to business. So again, if you think about the paradox of where we are in human life on this planet, life is beautiful, life is filled with joy and wonder and mystery. That is true. Life is also tragic and filled with suffering. So we've made incredible progress in the last 200 years. Materially, per capita incomes, life expectancy, literacy, many dimensions of human development have gone way up in recent years and decades and the last 2 centuries. But at the same time, we recognize there's still a lot of suffering in the world. There's certainly suffering, 3 billion people living on less than $5 a day, material suffering, but there's also other kinds of suffering that we see. So we are living at a time of relative peace and prosperity. Physical violence is down. despite the wars that are going on, compared to human history, we actually have far fewer conflicts today. Fewer people are being killed by murderers, by terrorists in wars, etc., than at any other time in human history. There might be short-term blips that go up and down, but for example, when I lived in New York City in the 80s, there were 3,000 murders a year. Last year, I believe there were less than 300. So there is something happening. We're moving towards a more peaceful way of existing overall. And prosperity, in the long term, as we see, has risen dramatically per capita incomes worldwide. But psychological suffering is on the increase. Anxiety, depression, drug addiction, suicides, all of these things have gone up. And during the pandemic, in the month of June of 21, something like 26% of young people in their 20s contemplated suicide. Think about the immense psychological suffering that exists in society and has been increasing. Social suffering, a lot of unrest out there, income inequality and other factors contributing to that in many parts of the world, street protests happening, and ecological suffering as well. And let me talk a little bit more about the ecological side of things. If you look in the last 100 years, just in the last century, the century of modern living, I would say, uh, which is a very short span of time in the scope of things, right? If you look at this planet, it's been around 4.5 billion years, so a century is nothing. If you look at us human beings as Homo sapiens, we've been around 200 to 300,000 years. So let's say about 2,500 centuries we've been here as human beings in our current form. So one out of those 2,500 centuries, look at the impact that we have made with the way in which we have created our prosperity. So 80% of the natural forests are gone, the old growth forests with incredible diversity in them. Some of that has been replaced by fast growing trees, but it's really kind of a monoculture. So we're losing incredible diversity there. 30% of the arable land is no longer usable. It used to be land we could use for crops, but now because of deforestation, desertification, soil erosion, which is a huge thing, we may only have 40, 50 harvests left at the current rate of soil erosion. And that's a massive problem because we're all made of soil ultimately. Mammals in the last century, 90% of large mammals are gone. This is in the wild, right? Most animals are now captive. 95% of the large fish in the ocean are gone. The only animal species that are increasing in number are factory farmed animals. And here again, the story is really grim that 75 billion animals and 100 billion fish are killed annually after living tortured lives on factory farms. If you look at the conditions that exist on factory farms, most of us would really be horrified at the way those animals are treated, and they become part of the food system. So that's a lot of suffering of a lot of animals to feed our appetites. We're also living through the sixth mass extinction in the history of this planet, the first one caused by human activity. We weren't around for the other five. The last one was 75 million years ago. But if you think about the reality that all species, all life is interconnected, and when insects, we have an apocalypse of insects disappearing and bees and so forth, that has incredible consequences for all of life. And the toxic burdens on humans is rising. If you look at diseases like cancer, which were rare, now it's expected. The estimate is about 45% of Americans will get cancer in their lifetime. A disease that was relatively rare a century ago is now affecting half of us. The rise of obesity, diabetes, autoimmune disorders, autism spectrum disorders, many things are rising, right? And I think it's the cumulative effect of the toxicity in us. The one study found that the average newborn baby has 187 known carcinogens in their blood. This is the consequence of modern living. And then pollution, which is really, a byproduct of creating all the products and services that we enjoy, kills way more people, 15 times more than wars and terrorism and all the other factors combined. Right? And this is avoidable. To a large degree now, this pollution is avoidable. We know how to avoid it, but we don't. So we're causing massive damage to this living ecosystem that gives us life and gives us everything. That resource is being rapidly depleted. It gives us about $40 trillion of value. You don't get a bill from the birds and the bees for the pollinations and so forth, but the fact is we're receiving about 40 trillion of value from nature, but we're destroying that asset at a steady pace. So I believe with so much suffering in the world, I talked about psychological suffering, I talked about social suffering, ecological. I believe that we need to think about healing. We need to heal ourselves. Our bodies need healing. Our beings need healing. Our families need healing. So many broken homes. We need to heal our companies. There's a lot of history of suffering inside our companies and our countries. We all recognize that we have never experienced the level of division, political division, in this country and in many other countries, in India and in Brazil and UK. I mean, many places, Mexico. Everywhere I go, the story is very similar. Incredible division. We need to heal our planet and its ability to sustain life. We've been talking about that. And we need to heal the past, the present, and the future. That's the incredible gift of this moment. The present moment allows us not only to heal now, but we can actually heal the past by acknowledging what happened, by doing a version of what South Africa did at the end of apartheid, truth and reconciliation. Acknowledge the truth, acknowledge the pain, the suffering, and then seek reconciliation from a place of forgiveness and atonement. And that is something we can do in the present moment. We can heal the past. Otherwise, it stays with us. And we all have, there's a very painful history that we all have to contend with, whether it's slavery or other institutions that have existed. We need to heal those. In the present moment, we can actually do all of that. So I believe it's so much suffering that we all need to be healers now. Every one of us, doesn't matter if you're a professor like me or a doctor or a lawyer or a CEO, or it doesn't matter what you do. We can think of yourself as a healer. That's our primary role. As the Dalai Lama said, our prime purpose in this life is to help others. And if you can't help them, at least don't hurt them. And the fact is that we are hurting each other. We humans are the cause of suffering on this planet for other humans, for other life forms, and for the planet as a whole, and the natural systems of this planet. Unnecessary suffering on this planet is really something that comes from us. We are the source of that. We also are the source of healing for that. Cannot happen without us. And if you do not consciously choose to be part of the healing, then we are probably part of the hurting. Most people don't wake up and say, today I'm going to cause suffering, in the world, but we do. We do that because we don't realize that we're causing suffering. So we have to wake up and consciously choose the path of healing. I will not knowingly be the cause of pain or suffering for another, unnecessary suffering for another. So what about the world of business? Is this all relevant for business? How much suffering are we causing in business? Well, this is one of the saddest statistics I have seen. Heart attacks, 20 to 33% higher on Mondays. 20% in the US and UK, in two studies that I've seen, and a recent study I found that's in Sweden, heart attacks are 33% higher. 4 a.m. Monday morning is the peak of heart attacks in the US. Our work is literally killing us. 120,000 Americans die every year from stress connected to work. It's estimated that 600,000 Chinese die every year from overwork, too much work. They had to invent a new word in Japanese and in Chinese, gaolaozi, that means death from overwork. Our work is literally killing us. It doesn't have to do that. We don't need to kill people to make money. And yet, this is what is happening. The real cost of doing business is the cost of human suffering, the biggest cost. The next time you look at a product that seems very cheap, we'll recognize that the real costs are not in there, whether it's ecological damage and all the other things, or the human cost of what it took to make that product. And the saddest irony to me is that even our healing professions have become places of suffering. Doctors, nurses, veterinarians who are doing noble work, who are living their purpose, who are healing, their professions are about healing, and yet they're suffering. They have higher levels of depression, anxiety, and drug addiction and suicide. Doctors have double the rate of suicide than the overall population in this country. So the way we work isn't working. But it doesn't have to be this way. We do not have to hurt people in order to make money. In fact, quite the opposite. We can run our businesses in a way that reduces suffering and brings more joy. The opposite of what is happening in many cases right now. And this is not about arguing that we need more healing businesses, more yoga places and massage places and all of that. This is saying that business itself should be thought of as a healing act. When I meet your needs, genuine needs, in a caring and loving way, I am healing you. When I express myself and serve you, that's a healing act for you and for me. But when I use you to meet my needs, it would be the same product. It becomes a source of suffering. So how do we think about business? I think business is fundamentally about us taking care of each other. Business is a way for us to scale caring in the world. That's healing. The book has about 25 or so stories of companies. I just want to share a few of them to give you a sense of what's possible when you start thinking like this. This one we call the parable of the pothole, and this is a fairly universal thing. Most companies have a kind of a caste system. You have the people who are in the offices and full-time and college educated, and they've got benefits and development plans and so forth. And then you have the people actually doing the work, right? The people answering the phones, the people in the cash registers, etc. Right? In many businesses, you've got a distinct divide there. And this was the story of this company called Apple Tree Answers, with the CEO, John Ratcliffe, having created a large company out of a roll-up of many smaller call centers, suddenly found there are thousands of people working. And he started looking at data in a more systematic way, employee engagement and annual employee turnover. And overall, the numbers were mediocre. But then he had a hunch, let me break it down by the hourly people and the college educated managers, right? And he found a stark difference. That for the college educated people, the engagement was about 60%, which is pretty good. And then the turnover was about 25%, which is not terrible. But on the other side, he found the turnover was 118%. People were leaving on average after 9 months, and the engagement was only 12 or 13% for the hourly workers. And he started asking them, tell them why are people leaving? He said, well, these chairs are terrible. They give us a backache at the end of every day. He said, oh, I didn't know that. We'll replace them with ergonomic chairs. And he started asking for suggestions every day. And ultimately ran into the reality that life is hard for people who are being paid close to minimum wage. They're living far away. They have terrible working conditions, and they have no buffer between them and financial ruin. The data showed that in 2019, 40% of Americans had less than $400 in the bank. And if they needed $2,000 within 30 days, would not be able to come up with it. People are living on the edge of financial ruin. They have no buffer. And he recognized that this is the reality for the people who work in our business, the 80% of people who are doing the hourly jobs, answering the phones. And we use the analogy there that imagine if the CFO of this company is driving into work in her Mercedes one morning, her car hits this pothole, the tire blows out, the rim gets damaged. All she has to do is call AAA, the car gets taken away, and then she gets a ride back to the office, and she arrives an hour late, and everybody is very solicitous of her. They say, oh my God, are you okay? That must have been so scary when your tire blew out. Can I bring you some coffee? Are you okay? Later that day, the car is repaired and washed and cleaned and delivered back to the office. And insurance took care of most of the cost. And this is a non-issue in our life and a non-event. And yet there was a lot of outpouring of caring towards her. Now, imagine if one of the hourly workers was driving that same road in her 14-year-old Toyota Tercel and hits the same pothole and blows out the tire, damages the rim, doesn't have AAA, can't afford that monthly annual payment, calls around, finally gets a tow truck from a gas station to take the car away, calls for a friend to pick her up and drive her because she can't afford to pay a taxi, arrives 3 hours late and is told that the supervisor is really mad. He's waiting for you. You better go in there right away. She goes in and she gets harshly reprimanded. And he says, I don't want to hear any excuses. You have to be professional. You need to be here on time. This is going to be a check mark against your record. 2 more of those and you will be fired. Now go answer the phones and be nice to our customers. Now, this woman's life is falling apart. She has no idea how she's going to get that car fixed. She has $160 in the bank. How is she going to get home? How will she get back to work? How will she take her kids to daycare? Her life is falling apart and we kick her when she's down. She gets no sympathy. And so John, recognizing this lived reality for the majority of people in the company, created a program called Dream On. And it was basically a pothole fund, is what we call it now. That if you have some emergency in your life, you don't want your life to get derailed just because of something like that. You don't have the ability to withstand it, but you want to help. And they put it out there, and for 8 days, nothing happened. Nobody responded. And he was surprised. I know people need things, but people are stoic and people are kind of heroic. They carry burdens and they're dealing with things that would crush so many of us, right? Life is hard. The vast majority of people, incredibly hard. And if you could see a thought bubble over their head, it would break your heart. But people come and they do their work. And there's a pride. I don't want to ask for help. So finally, after 8 days, they get a person writing in on the website. And the woman says, I'm so sorry, but I need help. She's a full-time employee, a mother of two. And she said, my ex-husband stopped paying alimony 2 weeks ago. And a week ago, my two kids and I got evicted from our apartment. They threw out everything onto the street. onto the curb, and now we're living out of my car for the last week, and I'm getting desperate, and I can't do this to my kids anymore. I'm so sorry. I need help. So John Ratliff sees this, and he says, all I felt, he had tears in his eyes, all I felt was a deep sense of shame. And I said, what kind of a company am I running here? What kind of a leader am I? Where people are homeless and they can't even ask for help. And it took them a week even after we put this program out there. So they, of course, reached out to her that same day immediately. They got her into a hotel that night. They helped her find another apartment within a week, helped her furnish it, helped her overcome the first month, last month, 30 day, 3 months of rent. I mean, who has that, right? They helped her with all of that. And then they told her, we can keep this confidential to protect your privacy. And she said, nobody has ever done anything this kind for me in my entire life. I'm going to tell everybody that I know. And she did. And before you know it, the floodgates opened and so many people came forward. And it's heartbreaking, all the things that were going on in their lives. And the company helped each and every one of them. And you fast forward 18 months, and that 118% employee turnover annual, by the way, the industry average 158%. That annual turnover went down to 16%. Think about that. When your employee turnover is 1/10 the industry average, do you think you have a competitive advantage? Do you think you're going to have better customer care? You will now do better as a business. And they did, right? But that's not why John did it. He did it from a place of caring, not from a place of calculation to say, if I do this, then we will get this outcome, right? But when you do kind and loving things for people, it does come back. I'm going to talk about that later a little more. Another quick example is challenging industry norms. Every industry has certain standard operating procedures. This is how we do things. And don't be trapped by those. Look at them objectively. Say, does this really necessary? Does it create unnecessary suffering? So if you look at the consulting industry, if you go to McKinsey or BCG or Bain or any of those companies, what do you have to give up? You have to give up your week. You have to be away at a client side all week, right? Monday morning to Friday night, you're gone. And that's fine when you're single and it's exciting. But what happens when you get married? Well, now you don't feel so great being away. And what happens when you want to have children? And now it's really bad because you will miss the childhood of your own children. So these three consultants at Accenture, when they looked at that, when they came to that point in their life, they said, this is too high a price to pay that I will be disconnected from my kids. And before I know it, they'll be grown and gone. Because I come home Friday night and I'm busy with other things and I'm gone again Sunday night or Monday morning. That is too high a price to pay. So they left Accenture and they created this consulting company in Atlanta called JBN. And they made one rule that all business will be local. You will never have to travel for work. All of our consulting clients will be local. And they explicitly said the children of our employees are stakeholders in this business. And that's an important statement to make because the fact is their lives are affected by what happens in this business. If you explicitly make that at the end of the year, they have the families evaluate the company. How are we doing? This made an enormous difference. And this little company in Atlanta now has 3 of the top 20 consultants in the country because you don't have to make that heartbreaking choice between your children and your work. And when their business, when they started getting inquiries from other places, they simply opened local offices now in Dallas and Charlotte and Chicago and probably more now, right? So it doesn't constrain you, but you take away these stupid rules that cause unnecessary suffering. A big one is confronting social sadness. Every society has some aspects about it that are wonderful and other aspects that really break your heart. In India, we have a lot of wisdom and consciousness and so much to offer, and yet we also have the caste system, where a significant percentage of people are considered to be untouchable by other people. And it's really just a terrible curse. In the US, we have a few things like that, one of which is our criminal justice system. We imprison more people. 73 million Americans have a criminal record, the same number that have a college degree. We put more people in prison than any other country in the world by far, as an absolute number and as a percentage. And this is Bernie Glassman, a Zen master living in Yonkers in Westchester County, one of the richest counties in America, but one of the highest levels of homelessness. And he looked around and he's trying to reduce suffering. I mean, that's his whole dharma, right, as a Buddhist. And his practice is bear witness to the suffering of others. Loving action will naturally arise. He went and spent a week living on the streets with the homeless people. And at the end of that, he knew what he had to do. Is that these people, many of them got caught up in the criminal justice system, and now they're trapped because they have to check that box that says, have you ever been convicted, etc. And when you do that, nobody wants to give you a job. He said, I want to give people a first chance. There are millions of people in our country that don't even get a first chance, forget about a second chance. And so he created Greystone Bakery. Why? Because it's easy to train people how to bake brownies. And he said, we do not hire people to bake brownies. We bake brownies so we can hire people. And he pioneered something unique called open hiring. Open hiring is basically no background checks and no interviews. You need a job, you put your name on the list, and we will hire the next name on that list. And we'll train you for 9 months and pay you and then put you in a job. And after that, it's up to you in terms of how well you do, right? So it's an incredible opportunity for people now to suddenly have a life. Dion Drew spoke at our conference a few years ago. He said, if it were not for Greystone, I would be dead or back in jail. He had been in jail 3 times. He said, every time I came out, I looked for a job. Nobody would give me a job. I ended up back on the street corner because I had to survive, and I would get arrested again and back to jail. And this time I found Greystone. And now he has a 6-year-old daughter, and he's a training manager. He makes $65,000 a year. And he was in tears. He said, I have a life now. I didn't have a life before because of this company. And these are all for-profit businesses, okay? We don't write about nonprofits in this book. Those are healing by definition, I think. But business can be that way. You know, a few years ago, HBR had this cover, the value of happiness, right? Happiness is profitable is the message. And a lot of CEOs said, wow, let's get some happiness around here. But if that's the reason you do it, because you see it as profitable, then it's like asking somebody to marry you. And she said, why do you want to marry me? And he said, well, I read that married men live 5 years longer and they make 30% more income in their lifetime. So there's a great business case for marriage. We should marry for love, and we should do this for love. Everything we do, in fact, should come from love. Every action in our personal lives and in our business should come from love. There's only one way to heal, and that is love. In many ways, we can hurt each other. And I believe ultimately everything should be, many business decisions come from fear and greed. Other decisions come from jealousy and anger and whatever it might be, envy. Everything should come from love. And if we can just make a reminder to ourselves, am I acting from love right now? And if I were, what would I do differently? So business, if you do it right, can be a place of healing for those who work there. They can leave at the end of the day physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and socially stronger than when they came in. They don't have to burn out. They can get re-energized. Business can be a source of healing for our customers and our communities, and it can be a force for healing in society. We can show how we come together despite all of our differences, racial, ethnic, political, whatever they might be, and we can do great things through this institution of business. And whether you have a healing organization or a hurting organization, as with everything, depends on the leaders. The leader sets the tone. And really, this is a journey for the leader and the organization. The more you heal yourself, the more you will heal the organization. We're all carrying wounds and traumas. I'm writing a book about that whole journey now, 7 steps to that, recovery of self. We all carry wounds and traumas. Most of us never acknowledge them. If you look at Satya Nadella at Microsoft, a big part of the transformation of that company is really his own journey and how he's healing through that, and the organization is healing. So I believe there are 2 things locked away in the corporate closet. There's unexpressed love. Human beings have a need to express their love and their caring. But our cultures don't really allow that or encourage that or facilitate that. And we have all this silent suffering. If we can liberate those things, allow people to express their love and allow people to express their suffering and their needs and their vulnerability, then that love will heal that suffering and will create a cascade of healing in the organization. It has to start at the top. The leaders have to model this way of being. And if you do that, our workplaces, which feel like prisons to many people, I mean, for the vast majority of people on this planet, work is not a source of joy or meaning or fulfillment. It's a place that you have to be for certain hours. You have no freedom and not much dignity. Our workplaces can go from feeling like prisons to feeling like playgrounds, place of camaraderie and fun and joy and creativity and so forth. Why not? Why should we not do that? Love, work, and play are the cornerstones of our humanness. Why can't we combine these things? Love what we do, love the people we work with, love the people we serve, and have fun doing it. At the end of our book, we offer a healing oath, just like doctors have to take a Hippocratic oath, because people's lives are in their hands. Likewise, leaders, I think, should also take a healing oath. And we have these 3 phrases, starting with Latin, because everything sounds better in Latin, right? Primum non nocere, first do no harm. I will operate my business in a way that causes no harm to others or to Mother Earth. That's a big commitment. Right now, we do cause a lot of harm. Malice eradicare, root out evil. I will never enable or collude with abuse or exploitation. I will stand up for fairness, truth, beauty, integrity, and basic goodness. And amor vincit omnia, love conquers all. I will operate from love and always measure success by the fulfillment, abundance, and joy I generate for all those whose lives I touch. And I think some version of that would be a beautiful thing to adopt for the business. Okay, I will stop here and hand it back to Brian and Michael and Karen.
The second purpose of today's call was just to share with you why the CEO Summit is the premier gathering place for conscious business leaders. And I want to invite Brian, who is a long-standing attendee of our summit, to just share a few words on why it is the best gathering place for purpose-driven leaders to share insights, exchange ideas, and just have a grand old time. So, Brian, if you want to jump on in.
Thanks, Michael. I appreciate it. And good day to everyone. I've been thinking a lot about that question, and the breakout that I just shared with Mark Mears and Chad Warren and Roseanne Higgins, I think is the perfect example. As I think about, and I'm sure all of us think about, the vast majority of conferences and events that we've attended over the years, so many of them, if not the majority, are organized either around the industry that we practice or the particular profession that we practice. And the Conscious Capitalism CEO Summit, as evidenced by the breakout I was in, is neither of those. You get people from all different walks of life, and yet this common DNA thread that pulls everybody together is this philosophical belief that business can be used as this incredibly powerful force for good. You've got people from all different types of industries who I think share this common belief and look at the businesses that they are responsible for and the people, the lives, and how they can create value for as many of their stakeholder communities as possible. That JBN example that Raj gave in his presentation about, well, yeah, the children of our employees or stakeholders too is just one of so many shining examples of how the leaders who gather every year in Austin are thinking about their ecosystem, their business as this ecosystem, and really moving away from the how do I extract from others to this common DNA thread of how do I create value for others, and do so. And I think it's important to mention over a long-term horizon. This is a group of people that aren't, held back by this every 3-month or quarterly mindset of what sacrifices do I need to make to the long term in order to hit short-term milestones. And by no means am I suggesting short-term milestones and hitting them aren't important. They are. But this is that balancing act, and something that Chad in our group said, it's about and. How do you hit the short-term milestones and make sure that the decisions you're making are in the interest of why you exist in the first place? And are you pursuing and making the decisions that are in support of your purpose? So that's just some of why I think it's just the best place, is this common shared philosophy that the group has. And again, the breakout that I was able to share in just a few minutes is yet another data point of we all share it and we become fast friends, and it's a wonderful thing. So thanks for letting me share, Michael. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brian, for that perspective. And then Karen, I want to welcome you up next to share some insights and perspective.
So it's good to see everybody, and thank you, Raj, for your comments and giving us another perspective on the healing organization. It's always good to be able to just reconnect with the messages of conscious capitalism through your many publications and many books that you've written. Conscious Capitalism CEO Summit. This will be my 12th CEO Summit. I joined Conscious Capitalism as a CEO of a public company, joined the board, and now I'm leading the organization. And I've had these different perspectives, but it is an incredible event where you're able to connect with like-valued leaders, where you are able to not only listen to really interesting, accomplished CEOs and thought leaders, but also spend time together in conversation and share your insights. So it's a give and take. It's a 1 and 1 is 11. We are able to take time to be together, to connect and convene, to be inspired, to find those tactical and transformational takeaways that are so important that we can bring back to our organizations, and create some new connections that we can share ideas with outside of our traditional YPO forums, and create new forums and new connections. In this year's CEO Summit, we are taking the opportunity not only to bring in incredible leaders and thought leaders around the conscious capitalism principles, but we are also really diving in deeply into issues that are on the minds of leaders, or on your minds. Things like, how do we look at AI through the lens of a conscious leader? What are different ways that we can approach hybrid or conscious capital? And we're looking, we're diving deep into wellness and well-being. So these are the areas where we can, as a big tent, an organization and a community of full diversity, think about these issues and others through a wide range of perspectives and a lot of dialogue. So we really are excited about the CEO Summit. I have enjoyed the CEO Summit, like I said, for many, many years, and I'm looking forward to this year back in Austin at the Hyatt Lost Pines, October 22nd through 24th. And as we wrap up, in the interest of time, there's a lot of ways to get involved with conscious capitalism. As an organization, we've been working on the number of touch points that we can have with CEOs, presidents, founders, and your teams and our community during the CEO Summit, and then the other 363 days of the year. So one way is through the CEO Summit. If you are a CEO, president, founder, board member of an organization with revenues of $5 million and up, nominate yourself. If you are not, nominate your CEO. And if we'd also like to see you get connected with our chapters. We have chapters across the US that are all doing very, very interesting topics, diverse from each other, and tied together with everything that we're doing at Conscious Capitalism. So join a chapter, go to a chapter event, and then if you're so inclined, join the chapter boards and bring your expertise. We also are offering these virtual gatherings at least twice a month. We have really interesting leaders who are spending time with us in our community. So there's that opportunity. You can also listen to the Conscious Capitalist podcast. Raj Sisodia and Timothy Henry have a fantastic podcast that we are now incorporating under the Conscious Capitalism umbrella. We will be bringing new leaders, but there's a treasure trove of great conversations that you can enjoy from the past 4 or 5 years that they've been hosting the Conscious Capitalist podcast. We also have different courses that you can take. So you can find them on our website, but there's many ways that you can continue to get involved, and please visit our website, reach out to us. We're building out the community of fantastic leaders at different levels of their organizations, providing ways for you to get involved and learn more about the courses that we're offering, consultants that are working in our community, coaches that are working with leaders in our community and elsewhere, experiences that are being offered through the community. So we really welcome you to join us on this journey to bring more conscious leaders into the community. I'll turn it back to you, Michael.
Thanks so much, Karen. I know we only have a minute left. I just want to bring Brian back quickly to share a final thought. I'm also going to add a link to a survey. This is a new format for us, so feel free to give us our feedback. I always try to incorporate it so that I can do better next time in serving our community. But Brian, back to you quickly for the last minute or so.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. And thanks, everybody. This is one of those experiences that is so inspirational and refreshing. Unfortunately, I don't know how many of you are like me. I don't get to spend every minute of my workday with Conscious Capitalists exclusively. So to be in community like this is just awesome. Would love if you'd like to raise your hand or if you want to pop it into the chat. I want to be respectful of time, knowing we only have a minute or so left. If there's a particular insight or a takeaway that you'd like to share from either the breakout or from Raj's presentation, or an appreciation that you'd like to share with anybody that you came into contact with today, whether it was the first time or someone that you hadn't seen in a while, just want to open that up a little. I'm going to pop into the chat and just see what's peppering in there. So yeah, let's open it up.
Greg, we will have some information on new chapters. Rob, I would love to do 90 minutes. Thank you for that. And yeah, just some appreciations on it, seeing some connection opportunities. Chad, thanks, first time attending one of our virtual gatherings. Much appreciated that you're here. And yeah, Brian, thank you for those closing comments. Sherry, thank you. Yeah, just a lot of gratitude. So to everyone, thanks for spending this past hour with us. Thank you, Michael. And we will see you at our next convening, our next virtual gathering. So thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon, and wishing everyone a great week. Take care.